Again, they've tried very, very hard to close it, even by outright lying about child sex abuse in an apology for clergy sexual misconduct. The apology itself was severely flawed in that it minimized, how many ministers were in fact guilty of clergy sexual misconduct. It said only a few ministers, were guilty of clergy sexual misconduct, when in fact literally hundreds of Unitarian Universalist churches have been affected by clergy sexual misconduct of one kind or another. And yes, it's not all pedophilia and rape, those are the worst forms. Even using the term misconduct to describe that is minimizing it. It's really clergy abuse and sex crimes. Another thumbs up there. But we're also talking about ministers making unwanted sexual advances, unwanted sexual comments, unwanted sexual touching, maybe even hugging a congregant, a little too passionately, shall we say. So there's sort of the lower end of things as well. And then, of course, there's the ministers having, so-called affairs with congregants, often cuckolding the husband, like a minister having an affair with a female congregant, who's married, and essentially cuckolding the husband. You can imagine how that goes over. And long-time attendee of the Unitarian Church of Montreal here. He's seen my protest many times, and like most Unitarians, he just ignores it, pretends nothing's wrong, just essentially is complicit. They're all complicit. They're all passively complicit in that, they've seen the protests, they've seen the picket signs, but they've done nothing, one way or the other. So every member of the Unitarian Church of Montreal who's seen this protest and has essentially ignored it is passively complicit. They're guilty of complicit silence at minimum. But unfortunately, a good number of Montreal Unitarians are even more complicit. I can even accuse them of being actively involved in the cover-up and denial, because, in one way or another, they've tried to silence me, to suppress the protest. They've brought trumped-up criminal charges against me. If that's not a internal oppression committed by Unitarian Universalists, I don't know what it is. Like getting back to the blasphemous libel accusation. This was clearly an attempt by the highest levels of the Unitarian Universalist Association to intimidate me into taking down blog posts. So they never actually acted on that because it was complete bullshit. I humiliated the lawyer for making that accusation and some other ones, and also humiliated the top level UUA leadership and UUA ministers who were responsible for this. In my responses to the cease and desist demand letter, I basically made it very, very clear that they were not only wrong, but stunningly foolish and stupid, and made the situation far, far worse than if they'd done nothing. They actually escalated the conflict significantly by falsely accusing me of blasphemous libel. And that hasn't been properly dealt with. I made it very, very clear very early on that, the Unitarian Universalist Association had to formally withdraw the false accusation of blasphemous libel, had to publicly apologize for it, and had to disclose the truth about ministers who were in fact guilty of committing pedophilia and rape and perhaps other sex crimes. I
said, first of all, they should
they did no such thing. You know, it's been years now. It's almost a decade now since they falsely accused me of blasphemous libel, and they've been reminded numerous times what they need to do. And they just ignore it, and they just pretend they didn't do anything wrong. Nobody's faced the slightest accountability. And again, this is another oppression. The institutional stonewalling, the institutional refusal to deal responsibly with clergy misconduct and so on, that is a form of oppression. Like basically doing nothing, just sitting there and refusing to hold anyone accountable is another form of internal oppression. So it will be interesting to see what happens today in terms of the vote. I'm sure they'll vote in favor of the watered down version of the 8th principle. But I will be reminding them of what it originally said, and I will be demanding that they must deal with internal oppressions, whether it's in their 8th principle or not. And so we're just waiting to see what happens. The Unitarian Church of Montreal is voting today, later today, and I believe the Canadian Unitarian Council is then, you know, compiling the votes of all of the congregations in Canada, and, you know, I guess we'll see what happens in a week or at 2 at most. I would say certainly by the end of the month or early December, we should know what happened in terms of the 8th principle. It would be interesting if they actually reject it. I have a feeling that probably won't happen, especially since it's being watered down to be more palatable. So it probably will be accepted, because that's the other thing is Unitarian Universalists, they just love to have these high-minded principles, which they then make a complete mockery of. So you know, by putting the 8th principle in, it's not going to necessarily change anything in terms of actual behavior, you know, because Montreal Unitarians and Unitarian Universalists more generally, top-level UUA leadership, dozens and hundreds of Unitarian Universalist ministers, they've all made a total mockery of Unitarian Universalist principles time and time again, you know. So they have these nice principles, but they don't actually live up to them. I see I've got about 5 minutes of recording time left in my half hour of recording time before the camera stops permanently. So I think we'll let the camera run. There's not much happening right now, but essentially, yeah, today's protest, November 21st, 2021, is essentially dealing with the 8th principle of Unitarian Universalism that the Unitarian Universalist community in Canada is voting on today, and then I think there'll be a final vote by the Canadian Unitarian Council in a week or so. I'm assuming they're going to compile the votes of the individual congregations, and it'll be based on that. But in any case, I think I might have seen a familiar face, but I'm not sure. Oh no, it's not who I thought it was. So anyway, people are seeing the picket signs. You know, there are people coming to the church today, and they're seeing these picket signs as they go in, and they will later vote on the 8th principle today. So I basically wanted them to see the protest outside, you know, before they voted on the 8th principle, especially in terms of its original wording, you know, speaking about internal oppressions. You know, I can't imagine that they've forgotten what it originally said, and it's only been revised quite recently, like in the last few weeks. So anyhow, yeah, somebody coming by here. I usually step out of the way as people come by on the sidewalk and let them walk by. Hi, good morning. So It's funny, the woman's wearing a red scarf, and I could say a thing or two about that. I mean, it has nothing to do with the woman, it has to do with the red scarf. And I will, but we're getting to the end of the recording time here, so a couple of minutes, I guess we got time. So, Sue Montgomery, Montreal Unitarian, who's definitely involved in all kinds of internal oppressions at the Unitarian Church of Montreal in terms of trying to shut down this protest. She criticized long-winded male politicians. She got herself elected as the mayor of Côte-des-Neiges-Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, even appointed the deputy mayor of Montreal by Valérie Plante. And so she was attending Montreal City Council meetings, and yeah, there was a few long-winded male politicians who maybe went on and on a bit too much. And so she took to knitting, and she would knit in red when a male was speaking, in other words, stop, and green when a female spoke. And of course, there was rather more red than green knitting. And that was the point she was trying to make, is that basically, men are speaking more than women. And I found that interesting, and this comes back to the red scarf that the woman was wearing, because if Sue Montgomery knitted a scarf with red yarn for every time I spoke out against Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse that includes such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape, and the cover-up and denial of pedophilia and rape in the Unitarian Universalist religious community, well, and green for the times she did, it must be, so red for when I speak about this, green for when she does, it would be 100% red, and it'd be a very, very long scarf. The point I'm making here is that Sue Montgomery is totally complicit in the cover-up and denial of pedophilia and rape in the Unitarian Universalist Church. Not only has she not spoken out against it, she has denied it in interviews. Like I said, it doesn't exist. I got a little honk from the bus. And I think on that note, this is ending.